Tom, are you good? Yep.
So good morning. My name is Justin Alfond. I'm proud to be one of the state senators for the city of Portland in the state Senate. You'll see today we're gathered here as a unified city of homeless clients, homeless advocates, community partners and leaders, city staff, city and state elected officials. We're here because we know Portland is different. We're here because we need the people of Maine and those outside of Maine to know there's another side of the story. One huge part of the story is not being told, and that's the human side of general assistance. If we all just step back and think about the affected populations, we're talking about people who are struggling with many issues. These are fellow Mainers who are struggling, and every decision and every action could mean a life or death scenario. You'll hear today from two clients courageous to share their stories of living in the shelters and getting out. Another part of the story you'll hear today is how Portland is different. I want to thank the administration for using the word outlier, because there's no one outside here today that thinks Portland is like any other community in Maine. You will hear today many reasons why we deserve that outlier description and how it has its advantages and challenges. Finally, you'll hear from all city leaders that we want to work on GA. We find the GA audit troubling, and we're ready to work on this together. Everyone outside here today wants to work with this administration and our GA program. You'll hear today all of us wanting the coordinated attacks on Portland to end, and for the real work of making our social program stronger to begin. The reality is that Portland did not become the economic powerhouse, the destination for seniors, for young people, for tourists of all over this country and world to come to the city by sitting still. Our city has always looked at challenges and faced them straight on. We're ready to collaborate. We're ready to work on how to make GA more efficient. We're ready to put the human side of this front and central, and we're ready to work with this administration. To lead it off today, I'd like to introduce our mayor, Mayor Brennan.
Well, thank you very much. It's been interesting, not necessarily what I was expecting, but you and the media have become my primary friends for the last week or two, because every time I wake up, there's another call from the news media to be on the radio, to be interviewed, to have a discussion about general assistance. So I'm really glad to be here today with everybody so we can have a full discussion about what's happening in the city of Portland and what's happening with general assistance and what's happening with homelessness. And Senator Alfond is absolutely right. We are an outlier. In any number of different categories, we're an outlier in the state. We drive the state's economy. We are the largest city. We are the economic epicenter for the state of Maine. But what's very troubling was that Commissioner Mayhew and her staff wrote a report calling us an outlier in general assistance. And never once did she or her staff call and say, why is your spending in general assistance going the way that it's going? Why are you, quote, consuming 65% of the general assistance costs? Never once called and asked us to explain what is happening in the city of Portland. And we have an explanation that unlike any other city in the state of Maine, a third of the people that we serve live in the city of Portland. A third come from other cities in Maine and in other parts of the United States. But fully 40% of the people that we serve come from other countries around the world, 40%. And that's been a dramatic increase for us over the last 3 or 4 years that has driven our cost. Now, never was a question asked, why did our costs go up? But secondly, there was a claim of mismanagement, that we weren't managing the program well. Let me read for you very quickly. This was dated May 29, 2013. This letter is to acknowledge receipt of a mail and review for the mail and review of the town of Portland. The review indicates that your program for the town of Portland is in compliance with the General Assistance statutes and the Department of Health and Human Services General Assistance Policy. This was dated May 29, 2013. The exact same letter we have in 2012. The exact same letter we have in 2011. We have the exact same letter in 2010. We have the exact same letter in 2009 and the exact same letter in 2008. Last year, when the audit was done, there were questions raised about, quote, presumed eligibility and some of the practices with the shelter and with general assistance program. We wrote a response to those questions that were raised in the audit. A year later, we have not heard back from the Department of Health and Human Services in response to our letter to them. So, as Senator Alfond pointed out, we stand ready. I called the governor on Monday and said we'd be more than happy to meet with him and with the Commissioner of Health and Human Services to discuss their concerns and their issues with the city of Portland. I thought it was urgent that we meet. The governor and commissioner, the first date they gave me was the end of March. So obviously the urgency is not shared with us in the same way that it has been with them. So again, we are ready, we're willing, and we are certainly able to work with the department and respond to the issues that they have raised. Two things very quickly and at the end. We've had a 7-point plan for the last 2 years in the city of Portland to end homelessness. And it's been extraordinarily successful. Councilor Slesvig, who chairs the Public Safety Committee, has been relentless in pursuing that plan. 2 years ago, we instituted a case management system that we had a success rate of 45% increase in the number of people that we found permanent housing for because we were able to actively engage people and find permanent housing for them. We will continue to work on that 7-point plan, and we'd love to partner with the governor and with the state to help us to address those issues. But lastly, I think it's extraordinarily unfortunate, and I think you'll hear other people talk about this, that we do have some people in the city of Portland that believe that their best option is to stay in a shelter, even though they have other resources available to them. And I hope that we're able to work with those people to ensure a better place for them and help them understand that they have a better and brighter future and don't believe that the only place and only recourse they have is to stay in a shelter in Portland. Thank you very much. And I know that somebody is going to speak next, but I'm going to leave it up to Senator Alfond to say who it's going to be.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So like the mayor said, there's a whole other side to this story that this administration is ignoring, they're leaving out, and that's why we're here today. Next, you're going to hear from Mark Swann, the executive director of Preble Street. There's no one in the city and in the state that knows more about the homeless situation, about all of the complications of GA, and also that this is not an easy story to tell than Mark Swann. Thank you, Mark, for being here.
Good morning. A beautiful elderly woman named Diane in her 70s sat outside our soup kitchen in a folding chair for over a decade, waiting for her son to pick her up and take her home. Every single effort to talk with her, to offer her housing, and to help her in any way was met with a gentle and soft response. "I'm fine, dear. Don't worry about me. My son is coming to pick me up on Monday." This was her response for over a decade. She suffered from schizophrenia with entrenched delusions and would occasionally slip into catatonic states. Tragically, because of the years this lovely woman languished in the shelters, she received no medical treatment and died of breast cancer. Diane's son never picked her up, and she never made it home. I've been the executive director of Preble Street for 24 years, and I'm blessed to have such a great job. But the hardest part of my job by far is not knowing if we'll be able to serve everyone who comes to our doors, hungry and homeless, cold and alone, scared to death. And can you even imagine how terrifying these past several weeks have been with the snow and the cold? And just think of the nights when you dreaded leaving your office and just the few minutes you take to walk to your car and the few minutes it takes for your car to warm up. How awful those 7 or 8 minutes are. And how happy you were to finally get back home. Sadly, we have brothers and sisters who have no place to go, to be warm and safe, don't have a home to get to. Emergency shelters have to be there for these people. We have to. It's a matter of life and death, as Justin said. Preble Street has to be there, the City of Portland's Oxford Street shelter has to be there, and the 41 other shelters around Maine have to be there. For those of us trying to keep these shelters up and running, these questions about shelter funding and general assistance are not political issues or newspaper headlines. They're about real people like Diane who are suffering and the limited and humble way in which we can help them. Again, it's a matter of life and death. That's what we think about. That's what those of us who run shelters worry about. And we know that nobody wakes up one day and decides they want to be homeless. No one wakes up one day and decides they want to be mentally ill. Being homeless in Portland at the Oxford Street shelter means sleeping on a thin mat on the floor, clutching all your belongings, inches away on both sides from strangers. And that's if you're lucky enough to get one of the mats here at this shelter. Earlier this month, one night, 282 people showed up at this shelter for one of the 142 mats that were available for them that night. 282 people, 142 mats. So 75 of those people walked down the street to our soup kitchen and slept on the floor there. Another 68 people sat up in chairs all night at city offices. A few people waited here at the shelter for a mat to open up, and at least one of them waited 11 hours before he could lay down his head for the 2 hours before the shelter closed and everyone had to get up and leave. Who wants this? Who chooses this? And is someone really getting away with something by getting this mat to sleep on? How on God's green earth could offering this meager service be considered too generous? 2 years ago, like the mayor said, Preble Street and the city started a long stayer initiative to try to focus more attention and resources on the 30 people who stayed at Oxford Street Shelter the longest. I don't know if that's the same 30 people that DHHS looked at in their audit, but it's certainly a very, very comparable group, all long, long stayers. Of those 30, all 30, 100% had serious and persistent mental illness, untreated mental illness like Diane had. It may well be that some of them had money in the bank, but if so, I'm certain that some of them didn't even know they had money, or because of their psychosis, they were unwilling or unable to use any of it. They were and are staying at these scary, overcrowded shelters and languishing on the streets because of their mental illness, not to save a few bucks. That's ridiculous to even suggest. And I have to say, anybody who lives or works or visits Portland knows exactly what I mean. These are the same people that wander our city streets talking to themselves, psychotic, delusional, and paranoid. Portlanders see them every single day in Monument Square, at the ferry terminal, in Deering Oaks Park. The mental health system is seriously broken, and that's not a new development that can or should be blamed on the current administration. The system has been unraveling for decades. The simple fact is that the shelters are overflowing with people who absolutely should not be there, but not because they have money. They shouldn't be there because it's inhumane that our mental health system is unavailable and inaccessible to them. Just like we've seen with our jails, the shelters have become de facto psychiatric institutions, but without the funding, the expertise, and the clinical skills needed to treat people. We just do our best to keep people alive. And emergency shelters do that with whatever tools are available to us, with whatever funding shelters can scrape together. Shelter directors' first worry, as I've described, is their client's safety. But their second worry, without question, is having the funds needed to stay open. 5 agencies here in Portland have stopped running shelters over the last decade or so because of lack of funding. 5 agencies, good organizations, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, YWCA, Youth Alternatives, Ingraham. Good organizations, but no money to run their shelters. Where did those clients go? Right here. But having said that, I also agree with the premise that general assistance is in fact the wrong mechanism for funding emergency shelters. It's meant for individuals in the form of vouchers for emergency food and emergency rent. That's what it's for, not to run shelters. I agree with that. But it's one of the only funding streams we have. So let's throw it out maybe, but let's make damn sure we have the resources, the sufficient resources to replace it. Funding for emergency shelters in the state has not been thoughtfully discussed or debated for over 25 years. I'm going to go in the weeds a little bit here because I want the facts out. A grand total of $380,000 in state general funds goes to support all 42 shelters throughout the state. $380,000 to support 42 shelters in general fund money. And that's even down from the $500,000 when that fund was established in 1987. Now, in addition to that, for the past 20 or so years, Maine Housing has, at its discretion, committed approximately $2.4 million in home funds to support the shelters. Thank God Maine Housing has done that. But that's not the right funding mechanism either. It's not why the home funds were established in the first place. It's discretionary, so it can go away quickly. And the home funds themselves often become a political football in Augusta, so it's a very vulnerable source. And then, of course, we have Portland and Bangor, who both use general assistance to keep the doors of their shelters open. Again, it's one of the very, very few sources available. So GA is not the right source of funds, the home funds are not the right source of funds, and $380,000 is nowhere near enough to support 42 shelters. What can we do? I propose that in a thoughtful way we transition shelter funding away from these funds and establish a meaningful and sufficient state fund to support Maine's emergency shelters. Let's call it the State of Maine Compassion Fund. The state needs to acknowledge the importance of emergency shelters as a crucial, absolutely crucial component of the safety net and fund them accordingly. The State of Maine Compassion Fund can do that. Now it's the time to start over. We owe it to those counting on us to do it right. And I would also ask that we all do a better job, all of us, including the media, at connecting the dots between untreated mental illness and the growing number of people at our shelters. Let's have a real conversation about that. Is this how we as a state and as a community want to treat people with debilitating mental illness? We have to stop pointing fingers at one another, stop saying what doesn't work and what's wrong with the current system. The issues we're talking about here are very complicated. Poverty, mental illness, and homelessness are complex. But I think we should and can figure out a good public policy to, at the very least, help keep people safe and warm and off the streets and alive. Please, let's all do that together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark hit on just so many important issues that unfortunately won't be caught tomorrow. But we're going to continue educating Maine and elected leaders, both at the city and state level, because this story has to be told. It's more than a soundbite, and it's more than numbers. I'm really just amazed and so proud that two two former clients of the Oxford Street Shelter are here with us to talk about what it's like to be homeless, what it's like to sleep 5 inches from someone else for the night and then be kicked out at 8 a.m. in the morning. The first person that will be talking with us is Glenn Duckworth. Thank you, Glenn, for being here.
Yeah. My name is Glenn, and I've been sheltered for a couple of months now. And hopefully, I'm not going to be here much longer, thanks to the Health Community Center across the street from Preble. They're going to get me fixed up and get me out of here. They asked me to speak today about the young people that are here, which I do feel bad for, on the fact that I see a lot of mental health challenges, people that I don't know if they'll ever get out of here. It seems that way to me anyway, and the people with physical challenges as well. Just the simple things in life, like getting a shower or going to the bathroom. You have a line that's 15, 20 minutes long just for easy things. I think the state of Maine needs to step up and do something different. I feel as though someone, I don't want to point the finger at anyone, but I know this is my story, and I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Glenn, and I do so much appreciate you being here, and everyone around this today is wants you to be out of that shelter too.
Yeah.
The next person who will be speaking is Gary Lee. Gary was raised in Eastport and has experienced homeless in the last year or so after a long career in the grocery business, and he's here today to share his story. Thank you, Gary.
I was a pretty functioning individual up until a couple of years ago, and I didn't realize that I had developed depression and wasn't diagnosed, and that is how I got to the shelter. I'm sorry. And I am so grateful that it is here, but I think people think that we come here, have the misconception that we choose to come here. Everyone has a different reason why they're here. Some people, a lot of people have mental illness, like myself, physical disabilities, as he said. Some people have lost their job. I spoke to a man this morning who had lost his job, his truck broke down, and he has cancer. And if we didn't have this place to go, where would he go? As Glenn said, we wait in line all day long. We wait in line to get food in the morning. We wait in line to go to the bathroom. We wait in line at night to get a bed. And it's cold. And you have these elderly ladies. Picture your grandmother waiting in line for a half an hour or an hour in the cold to just lay down on the floor. Sorry.
Great.
I don't think people understand. I think that the conception that is being brought forth is that, as I said before, that we choose to be here. No one would choose to be here if they had money. If they could understand that they had choices, but people with mental illness don't have that. I laid next to a man who thought he was Hitler's grandson. I laid next to another man who thought that people were out to get him, that the government was chasing him. You know, these people are not living in, understand the reality that is there. Other people are sick. Other people have drug abuse issues and things. People don't understand what it's like to sleep in a room with 75 people on a floor 6 inches apart. To wait for a shower. To not have a place to store your stuff. To have to carry your things around all day. And things shouldn't be like that. Everybody has a right to have a place to live. Everybody has a right for something to eat and a bed to sleep on, not a mat. And I hope that people will become aware and learn that we're not here because we choose to be here. We're here because of so many different reasons, and we don't want to be here. But we just need some help to get out. That's all. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Gary. Thank you very much, Glenn. I mean, as you can see, everyone's shivering. It's freezing out. You're shivering in the media. We're shivering here. This is the daily experience of being homeless. Every single homeless person in Portland, in this state right now, is out on the streets. There's nowhere to go. There might be some place to potentially have a little bit of space for being warm, but it is a hard, hard experience. What we're trying to share today is that there's more to the story than just the numbers being spun by this administration. We're ready to get to work with Mary Mayhew and the governor, but we need a willing partner. We'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you all for being here.
We also have more of these packets if any of the media want the facts.
The commissioner said that the department really is very keen to speak to council and to Portland about this since the audit came out. Have you approached them this week since you saw the audit? Does anyone?
So as far as the city, I can't speak for the city, and I know there are folks here from the Health and Human Services Committee, and I'd look to Peter, and I'd look to counselors, I'd look to Drew for those answers. But we do know next week is a very important week in the Appropriations Committee, where the Appropriations Committee and the Health and Human Services Committee will be talking about all of the programs in the state that we support people, and general assistance is an important one. But there should be no confusion that the city at every level, whether it's elected, city leaders, we are ready to work with this administration, we're ready to work with Mary Mayhew, and there is nothing but just this wide, a gap right now of putting out press releases and putting out reports without getting any of our input. We're ready to work and we're willing to work.
Do you feel that, I know you look at this as, not seeing the complete picture and there are people with mental illness. Do you feel though that there are some people who are taking advantage of the system? And are you looking to get to the bottom of that if there are?
Without question, the audit, doesn't add up. And we are absolutely ready to dig into the audit. As we all know, they have given us the first piece of that. We have to look at that audit. We're going to look at the things that we agree with, the things that we appeal, and then have a discussion. But there's no one outside here today, there's no one that's homeless in the state of Maine that wants anyone who has the capacity, both financially, mentally, to be using a bed that is so necessary for those that really need it. If there are problems, we're going to get to the end of it and we're going to address it. But I think right now it's being put out so simplistically. This idea that just because that Portland is 5% of the population of Maine and we spend 65% of the GA. I mean, that is the most simplistic statement and doesn't tell any of the story. And that's what today is about, is to start at the beginning, the education about the rest of the story that's out there.
Do you know how they go about doing the audit, and is this something that officials in Portland should be doing as well?
I'm going to let potentially Councilor Suslovic answer that.
Ed Suslovic, Portland City Councilor and Chair of the City Council's Committee on Public Safety, Health and Human Services. As the Mayor mentioned earlier, we've been, for the last 2 years, following very closely and working closely with staff, other stakeholders like Preble Street and others, to implement the 7-point plan to end homelessness. So we're very involved, we're very on top of. Tuesday night, next Tuesday, a week from Tuesday night, March 10th at 5:30, Portland City Hall, our committee will be hearing from city staff with proposals to make alterations to our system. I think we all acknowledge that, and you've heard Speak Up Speak, so GA is not the ideal vehicle to be dealing with the issues that we're dealing with here. But we're trying to do the best we can to make it work. And as the Mayor pointed out, year after year after year, and it's all in here, audit after audit, total compliance, total compliance, total compliance. We haven't changed our procedures. Last year was the first time that the state came in and said, we think there's some things to change. We welcome that opportunity. You heard the mayor say, he called the governor, and the soonest that the governor and the commissioner are willing to come down here is in a month or so. We're not going to wait a month. We're meeting next Tuesday night, a week from Tuesday night, to go through the audit and say, like we do with the city audit, like we do with the school audit, the school committee members here, an audit is an opportunity to look and see how can we make improvements. But in a partnership, which is what GA historically has been in the state of Maine, a partnership between the state and the cities and towns. Partnerships work best when partners sit down at the table together and talk to each other directly and say, how can we improve things? And that's what I would like to see, and I think that's what everyone here would like to see.
There's been a pretty clear past few weeks. This campaign was the administration was very vocal criticism of Portland, especially on social media, press releases. There hasn't seemed to be a coordinated response on the city's part. This is the first press conference we've seen on this. Why is that?
Well, I mean, let's face it that I think everyone in this audience and probably the whole city of Portland scratching their heads on trying to understand why this administration and Commissioner Mayhew is attacking what we would argue all day long is the best asset in the state of Maine. We're the economic engine. Every economic metric that you can find, Portland is either at the top or very near the top. So it makes no sense that this administration and Commissioner Mayhew is singling out Portland in this attacking fashion. As far as why today is the first press conference, look, you know, we all do our jobs in the trenches. We're not into putting out press releases. We're not into having, you know, empty rhetoric. What Portland has always done since I've been in this town is that we look at challenges and we face them head on, and we want to work and collaborate with people. We hope that today showcases to the state of Maine and more importantly to this administration, enough of the attacks, enough of the finger pointing, enough of only telling half the story. Let's make sure that we can work together. Like Councilor Susslovic and the mayor said, we're ready to work. And you know what? Maybe a phone call from this administration to the city today saying, you know what, we're going to move up that meeting because we're not going to wait a month, should be in order. Because if this is so serious to this administration, if they could spend so much time on social media putting out these fancy reports, why can't they spend an hour with us trying to say, how are we going to solve this together?
Mayor, respond to that?
Well, well, I think Senator Alfond did a pretty good job responding to it, but I think, Kevin...
You're the mayor, you're the public spokesman.
Look, we have two obligations here. One obligation is to assist people who are in financial need, who are homeless, and do the best job that we can to assist those people. We also have an obligation to taxpayers in the city of Portland and the state of Maine to make sure that we're running the program following state statute, best policy, best practices, and best procedures. On Monday, I called the governor and I said, Governor, this has to stop. I can't spend every day responding to a news release from Commissioner Mayhew or from your office attacking the city of Portland on general assistance. And I said, and most of it is responding to issues that are not correct, information that's not correct. And I said, I'd like to meet with you and the commissioner as quickly as we possibly can. He said, fine, I'll make it a top priority. Later in the day or the next day, we got a telephone call from Commissioner Mayhew's office and said March 23rd was the first time that they'd be able to meet with us. It was a month later. So we have not called to confirm because I'm trying to call back to say, can we push up the date? Can we meet more quickly to have that discussion? So we've tried to reach out. We've tried to have that conversation. We have a sense of urgency on our part to try to address these issues. But to go back and say what I said before, we wrote a letter last year responding to audit concerns that were raised last year. We're a year later, Kevin, and not had a response back from the Department of Health and Human Services. So it's very difficult for us, as Councilor Susslovic pointed out, to engage in a partnership and a collaborative discussion with the state when they're unwilling to do that. And I'm more than happy to sit down with any of you, anybody here, citizens of Portland with the state of Maine, explain our general assistance program, explain our spending, explain the demographics, the challenges that we're facing. We're an open book. We have nothing to hide.
So we have time for probably one or two more questions.
What changes do you feel like need to be made in line with the report? You talked about at the beginning, you feel like some changes need to be made.
So I'm going to pass this off either to Councilor Susslovic or Mayor Brennan, since they're here on the ground. But again, there's no one in this audience saying that we are not taking this audit seriously and that changes will be made. And as Councilor Susslovic said, we're not going to wait till March 23rd to have the discussion. They're going to be at the City Council on Tuesday, ready to get to work. So I don't know if there's initial.
Yeah, and after we break, I'm happy to go through in very specific detail the issues that the administration is raising is really infinitesimally small. For example, this presumed eligibility that they're making a big case out of, it's just for reimbursement for a night at the shelter. If that individual wants to get any other general assistance in terms of food, rental assistance, anything like that, they have to go through the entire asset check. So again, what I want to emphasize is the points of difference. And I'm the first to say, if there's ways we can tighten it up, we will tighten it up. That's why we're meeting a week from Tuesday night in committee to go through this and work with our staff. So I'm happy to go through afterwards, and we can really drill down into the weeds if you want. And you can see that there's really very, very small points and very small amounts of money that are being called into question here, disproportionate press attention being paid. But we're going to look at everything, and that's why we're meeting a week from Tuesday.
And again, this has been portrayed as a gotcha issue. And it certainly has captured the attention of the public, as it rightly should, as well as the news media and others. However, it's a practice that we have engaged in for decades that has been endorsed by the department, by previous administrations, and even by this administration up until this year. People also need to understand that when you talk about people staying in shelters that have other assets, they've also been recognized that they aren't able to